They used to do a lot. I mean, they used to follow, there was a time when you couldn't get through the book, but, later in the day, they got both wrists slapped. Then they got a short leash.
I'll take an audio recording site a couple of members. Like I do an audio recording but as a video. For like me, so it's like, hey, here we go. Yeah, whatever you guys need. Here we go. How are you? Another day in paradise. I didn't have election day pizza, so I'm missing out.
You know what came up in my Facebook memories the other day?
What?
That Oreo Speedwagon gig you
Oh.
sent me to. Like 5 years ago.
At Ovation when they were
Still the greatest day I've ever had on work in my life.
You know, at least I kept those things in mind for
Yeah.
you guys.
Remember that?
Yes, I did. And I was like, I know how big of an Oreo Speedwagon fan you are. You are absolutely right.
Kids are good? Everything pretty healthy? Good. How old?
You can see a cover. This is like running around like crazy, and I get home and it's like, daddy. That's all I need.
Savor those moments, my friends.
Yeah.
Now my daughter's 19, a couple weeks now, December 21st. I don't even see her. She was in Mass with work and stuff. She works full time, goes to school now. So yeah. And I'm just very careful about.
Yeah, we are.
She works in an eye doctor office, so she sees patients and stuff. So
yeah, we're not.
This is our few and far between.
We don't see grandparents at this point.
Yeah, I don't even see my folks. They live a couple miles from us, so we sit outside.
Yeah.
Actually,
I think that's maybe what we'll do.
Maybe 70 like that.
Yeah, this may be a weekend for.
Would you mind? Are you? Okay.
it's like 400 plus kilometers.
You want to start?
Sure.
Or you want me to?
I think I started last one. You want to start this
Okay.
one? Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Let me just begin by congratulating all of the candidates who won and all who lost last night in state legislative races. All of the candidates who competed really deserve to be congratulated. We had some great victories for Democrats last night in the state legislative records, and I'm very, very heartened by those victories, which certainly showed a great Democratic victory last night, the result of a lot of teamwork and volunteers, unprecedented numbers. And as I went around to polling places yesterday in every part of the state, from one corner of the state to another, probably 10 to 15 different polling places, I saw a wave of enthusiasm and energy that really was unprecedented. And it's reflected in those numbers and some wonderful victories in state legislative races and in the Biden victory here in Connecticut. Obviously, the final results are unknown in the Biden-Trump race, but Biden seems very much on a path to victory right now. He is ahead in Wisconsin and Michigan by more votes than Donald Trump won by in 2016. He is ahead in Pennsylvania in areas where votes are uncounted by 4-1 margins. And he has been declared a victor in Arizona. In Nevada, the race is too close to call right now, but we anticipate he'll win there too because, again, a lot of the absentee or mailed-in ballots will be in his favor. So we're not here, at least I'm not, to declare victory, but I am confident that the result will be a Biden victory. I'm confident that Joe Biden will bring new leadership to the nation. And the message I heard as I went around the state was we need to come together, we need to heal, we need to conquer the pandemic, we need strong leadership to do it. Joe Biden emphasized that he wants to be president for all America. And that's the kind of president we need right now. The point that's maybe most important for today is all the ballots have to be counted. Every vote has to be counted. Donald Trump is trying to stop the counting, saying he'll go to the Supreme Court. That is an absolutely astonishing and appalling attempt to forestall the democratic process. We're here to defend the democratic process by saying the President of the United States doesn't get to decide when or how the ballots are counted. Donald Trump does not get to decide who votes or how and when those votes are counted. The counting will go forward as it should. We've anticipated that it would be close and that it might well take a day or days to reach a final result. No one should be surprised. And no one should join Donald Trump's spurious, specious call to stop the counting. And if he tries to go to court, I'll just emphasize this point, I'm pretty familiar with the litigation involved here. There's no precedent for it. There's no factual basis for it. The courthouse doors are open to anyone, as I know as a prosecutor. But that doesn't mean the courts side with a frivolous, fact-free claim, which is what Donald Trump is making here. There's no evidence of fraud. The votes will be counted in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and Arizona and every state where there remain absentee ballots or mailed-in ballots to be counted. And I am confident that those votes will show a Joe Biden victory. He already has surpassed the previous record for the number of people voting for him. He's already overtaken Barack Obama's previous record of the number of Americans casting votes in favor of a presidential candidate, which shows the level of support for him. We always said, to repeat, this election would be close based on the Electoral College counts. So what's happening here is normal, especially given the pandemic and the numbers of people voting absentee or mail-in. It should be expected, and I expect a Biden victory when the votes are all counted, and especially when it comes to our military. Remember what Donald Trump is trying to do. He's trying to stop the counting of military service people ballots, along with all the others that have voted in this election. That is simply anti-democratic. You might have expected it from an authoritarian, autocratic leader in some tiny South American or African country, but not from the President of the United States. Trump doesn't get to decide who votes or how the ballots are counted. So I'm hoping that we will come together as people want. I'm hoping that this election will enable us to come together because people want us to get things done, to overcome the divisions, to end the discord and dysfunction in Washington, and I'm hoping we can do it as we go back, beginning with another relief package, a pandemic relief package in the lame duck session. So with that, let me yield to my colleague from Connecticut.
Thank you very much, Dick. Thanks everyone for being here today. Let me add by just expressing my gratitude to all of the poll workers here in Connecticut. We had an event-free election day yesterday in Connecticut. That's unfortunately rare in this state. It seems that every 2 years we normally have one meltdown that's happening somewhere around the state. That didn't happen yesterday. A real credit to Denise Merrill and her team and clerks and registrars all across the state who had to conduct an election with record turnout amidst very difficult circumstances and seemed to have pulled it off incredibly well. I voted just up the street here at my polling place in Hartford. And, these poll workers, they were putting their safety in jeopardy by being out there all day yesterday. The polling places were safe. The lines were long, but a lot of gratitude goes to the people who made a safe and efficient election day happen here in Connecticut. My congratulations to the winners here in Connecticut. Pretty impressive to have Democrats now looking at a supermajority in the state Senate, expanding their majority in the state House by at least 7 seats. When your majorities get big, it's hard to make them even bigger. And we had a lot of fantastic candidates. Many of them ran for the first time in 2018, come back and run again in 2020 and prove victorious. And I think that speaks to the sustainability of the movement in Connecticut. There's a lot of new people who have gotten involved in politics since 2016 in Connecticut. Many of them won last night and are going to be forces for good and forces for change in this state for a long time. Turning to the federal scene. We don't live in a democracy if we don't have a commitment to count all the votes. Right? What separates a democracy from an autocracy is that we count all the votes. We let the people decide who's going to lead this country. When all the votes are counted, it looks as if Joe Biden is going to be the winner. Dick, I think, did a good summary of where things stand today. But once the votes are counted, I don't think there's any way that Vice President Biden won't have a majority of both the popular vote and the Electoral College vote. And he may, by the end of the day tomorrow, have won in some surprising places, like Georgia, where the count is still open. But our commitment today has to be to counting all of these votes. And Republicans and Democrats need to come down hard on the president if he tries to cut off this count. Dick's right. The courtroom doors are open to anybody, but that doesn't mean we need to endorse the president trying to bring specious legal claims that seek to do only one thing and one thing only, which is to stop the counting of votes. And Republicans and Democrats should both be objecting to anything the president tries to do to stop the counting of votes. And let's be clear, it was Republicans who made the decision in most of these states to wait until today to count the votes. It was Republican state legislatures in the Midwest that pushed off the counting of mail-in votes until today. It was Republican county officials in Pennsylvania that decided to not start counting mail-in votes yesterday and only start that count today. So many Republicans in these states are responsible for the count being delayed a day or two. And so it's interesting that Republicans have undergone this campaign to push the count off for 24 or 48 hours and then have a Republican president trying to shut that count down. I don't think that's going to happen. I think these votes are all going to be counted, and I believe that at the end of the day, Joe Biden is going to be elected president. And that's good news for Connecticut. You know, we're not here to declare a winner, but we know if Joe Biden's president, that's good news for our state. Joe Biden knows Connecticut. He cares about our state. He's going to work with our governor to finally turn the corner on COVID. He's going to push for infrastructure investments that will help us rebuild our transportation and energy grid here in the state. He's going to lead on issues like gun violence. Obviously, we don't have all of the results in the United States Senate. It may come down to a couple special elections in Georgia in January. But no matter what happens in the Senate, the election of Joe Biden, as it looks like will happen, is great news for Connecticut. He's going to invest in Connecticut. He's going to help us confront the pandemic in Connecticut, and he's going to work closely with the delegation on our priorities as well. So we'll be monitoring the count throughout the day and throughout tomorrow. We'll be talking to our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make sure that we build bipartisan support for counting every vote. And I think when all is said and done, perhaps later today, perhaps tomorrow, we will be able to declare definitively who's won this election. And it looks as if that will be Vice President Joe Biden. I'd be happy to take questions.
Can we go back to talking about the Senate? I know in this race the Democrats have really hoped to take back the Senate. What do you think happened yesterday or throughout the voting process that this doesn't look like it's going to happen?
Yeah. Well, you know, the map was, you know, very, very big. And obviously we didn't do as well as we had hoped in some traditionally Republican states. But we're really excited for two new colleagues that we know for certain, Mark Kelly and John Hickenlooper. I don't know whether the race has been called in Maine, but they, I think, are still counting votes there. And we may have two runoff elections in Georgia. Those two runoff elections, you know, may decide the control of the Senate. And Georgia is clearly a state right now that is 50-50. You know, but our job obviously is different if Democrats control the Senate, but we were still likely going to need to be able to reach out and get Republican support for things that we care about. And even if Republicans control the Senate, you know, we think with a Biden administration, if that's where the presidential election goes, we can still be able to deliver really good results for the state.
Yeah, let me just add, Chris is right. The map was big. If you had told us a year ago that we might take back control of the Senate, we would have said, that's crazy. The hope of doing so was always an uphill battle. And in all of these states, the margins were razor thin in the polls. In Maine, in North Carolina, in Montana, in Georgia, they're still razor thin. They haven't been called yet. So I think we still have a hope. There's no conclusive result in many of those states, but whatever happens, the Republican margin will be greatly reduced. They will have to do business with us, and they will have to do business with a President Biden. And my hope really is that they will feel more accountable to their constituents as a result of this election, that they will recognize their individual responsibility to get things done and stop the discord and dysfunction.
What about pandemic relief, regardless of whether it's a Democratic-controlled Senate and a Republican-controlled Senate, if President Trump's back in office, or it's Vice President Biden? Where do we stand on that? Because I mean, that's, you know, states are going to be adopting budgets. Connecticut's going to be adopting a new 2-year budget in this upcoming legislative session. Excuse me. Other states are going to be doing so. This is going to be a big issue for state legislatures and government.
I'm very hopeful that we can do another pandemic relief bill in the lame duck. What's necessary is for Pelosi and Trump to reach an agreement that is robust and meaningful and includes unemployment insurance, aid for small businesses, a stimulus check, more aid for hospitals and other health care, including more testing. It can't be the McConnell fig leaf, skinny bill, really an emaciated bill. It has to be robust and meaningful, and then McConnell has to put it on the floor. If he puts a robust bill on the floor, let's say it's 1.8 trillion or 2.2 trillion, it will pass, as long as he's willing to have a vote. So I'm hopeful because the country is absolutely desperate. We're approaching another surge. We need another pandemic relief bill for small business, for individuals who are struggling to put food on the table, restaurants hanging by a thread, unemployment insurance absolutely necessary, pandemic relief for PPE, protective gear, and testing, and mask wearing, which we know is essential. So I think there's a powerful imperative and dynamic for another pandemic relief program. And I just want to emphasize a point that Chris made. Not only did the state legislatures enact these rules that result in counting after midnight of November 3rd, but it's also Republican as well as Democratic votes that are being counted. So we should be coming together on a bipartisan basis and saying, no, absolutely not to Donald Trump when he talks about going to court in some kind of absolutely specious lawsuit that is designed solely to confuse and spawn chaos. And my hope is that we can come together on a bipartisan basis there as well. And I do agree also with Chris. You know, both of us have a relationship with Joe Biden. We know Joe Biden. We've known him for decades. I've worked with him when I was Attorney General, going back to the early 1990s. And his heart is in the kind of values and needs that Connecticut has. And I think he's going to favor not only roads, bridges, airports, ports, all infrastructure, energy, broadband, VA facilities, but he's going to bring an end to the corrosive disrespect for the rule of law, which has been so absolutely insidious for America and has undermined a lot of the efforts to come together on a pandemic relief program in these last few days.
Let me just, so I am hopeful that we'll be able to pass COVID relief legislation, but maybe I may be a little bit less optimistic. Here's what I worry. I worry that if Donald Trump loses, he's going to be in a mood to burn down the country. That doesn't sound like somebody who's going to come to the table and help us write a COVID relief bill. And then I remember 2009. I was a House member in 2009 when the economy was melting down. And Mitch McConnell did everything he could to stop a recovery bill from passing. He refused to sit and negotiate with the newly elected president. And so I worry that McConnell, if he's in charge of the Senate again, will do exactly what he did in 2009 and offer no helping hand to Vice President Biden when it comes to COVID relief legislation. So that doesn't mean I'm not hopeful. I just do worry about the way in which Trump will behave in a lame duck session, and in the way McConnell will behave if a Democrat is in the White House. If passed as predicate, it's going to be hard to get legislation passed. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you both about early voting. Do you think that is something that Connecticut should move towards? I know it's something that's come up in the past, and you both will be running for, perhaps running for re-election in this state.
I'll just speak for myself. I mean, listen, I have strong feelings about this. I can't believe that Connecticut allows itself to be in the Stone Age when it comes to our voting rules. We are a national outlier with respect to how hard we make it to vote in this state. You know, we're supposed to be a progressive state, and yet we don't have early in-person voting and we don't have mail-in voting. I know that takes a constitutional change. I know we tried once and failed, but I think the success that we've had in Connecticut in expanding out absentee ballot voting opportunities should cause us to once again try to fix the infirmities of our voting system in Connecticut and allow for universal mail-in voting and early in-person voting. We shouldn't be one of the only states in the country where you are essentially forced to vote on one day of the year. And I will sign up to be part of any effort to get those two initiatives passed, whether it be through legislative act or by amendment to the state constitution.
And I do expect to be on the ballot in 2022, and I would strongly support that we have early voting, and the proof of its working is in this last election, where, as Chris said very well, compared to past elections, this one really went smoother with larger numbers than others. There was a huge turnout on the day of the election, but early voting reduced the potential for confusion and lines and so forth. So I very much hope that we're going to have as much early voting as possible. If it requires a constitutional amendment, I will be 100% in favor. I'll work for it and support it in any way that I can, and look forward to the votes being cast in 2022 in both the gubernatorial and presumably my Senate race by early voting.
Going back to the Senate for a second, Democrats throughout this election cycle have talked about major changes, healthcare, climate, structural reforms. To what extent, if Republicans hold the Senate, do you have to kind of temper those expectations or cut back on your wish list?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot harder. I mean, if Mitch McConnell's still running the Senate, you know, he's going to continue to try to undermine the Affordable Care Act. He's going to try to do the bidding of the fossil fuel industry. You know, there will be actions that Biden, if he wins, can take through executive action. But, you know, our ability to, you know, expand healthcare coverage and take on climate change are definitely limited if McConnell is still majority leader, which is, you know, why we're not going to stop fighting. We're going to make sure we count all the votes in Georgia, count all the votes in Maine, you know, work hard on these special elections. So, you know, I don't think either of us have, you know, given up hope that we can have a majority in the Senate, because it does make a big difference.
Yeah, I would make a few points. First of all, we have to be ready for a fight. There's going to be a fight on many of these issues: healthcare, environment, other kinds of issues that are central to setting a new direction for America. And Americans want a new direction. Republicans will have a razor-thin majority. So all we need is for one to go our way, and the vice president can break a tie. So Mitch McConnell will be in a greatly weakened position. Also, there has to be some chastening effect on our Republican colleagues when they see Cory Gardner, Martha McSally, who marched lockstep off a precipice and lost their seats. Our Republican colleagues know that in 2022, a number of them will be on the ballot. In fact, more of them than our ranks in that year. So I think there will be some chastening effect on them. Plus, you know, their constituents in those states where a number may be reelected will want to do something about climate change and gun violence protection and health care. The overwhelming number of Americans, without any question, favor protecting people with pre-existing conditions. They favor universal background checks and other measures against gun violence. They favor doing something about climate change. And there again, coming back to Connecticut, Joe Biden has shown that he understands Connecticut's stake in climate change, that we are dependent on the tides not rising, that we need the kind of change that will preserve our air and water from contamination. And I think he will marshal a very powerful momentum for the Green New Deal, even though he hasn't endorsed it. Elements of it, I think he will support strongly, and that we will make progress on it. And I've endorsed it. I think Chris has endorsed it too.
So along the lines of that chastening effect, it seems like a lot of Democrats are hoping for a real landslide election up and down this ballot that would repudiate Trump and force Republicans to really look in the mirror. To what extent do you think that actually happens?
You know, we remain a divided country. There is no denying that our country is divided and that we need a Joe Biden who can help us heal and unify. And I think that's the kind of leader that he will be. I've known him for probably close to 25 years, maybe more, and he has always been someone who wants to bring together people who disagree. And I think what we saw in this election was a desire for that kind of leader. But we remain deeply divided, and we have to unify and heal.
I would just add, I mean, even if Joe Biden had won by 3 more points or had won an additional state, Donald Trump was still going to be the head of the Republican Party. And so Donald Trump is not going to disappear from the political scene. He's still going to be the most influential person in the Republican Party. He's still going to dictate the terms of policy debate inside their party. I wish that weren't the case, but I think it is. So, you know, what we needed to do last night was make sure Donald Trump was a one-term president, and it looks like we were successful. I think we would have set wildly unrealistic expectations if we thought that the result of last night, no matter the margin, was going to be to eradicate Donald Trump from American politics. He's not going anywhere, whether we like it or not, and the margin of the election last night wasn't going to change that.
And I think we need to be very clear-eyed. We, you know, I think Chris is absolutely right. We need to be very clear-eyed about the fight ahead. And we are going to have a fight on some of these issues because the Republicans are absolutely dug in on abolishing the ACA. They voted for it 40 times and ending protection for people with pre-existing conditions. They have no health care plan. They have no environment plan. They have no measures that they've endorsed for gun violence prevention. And so it will take leadership, but ending Donald Trump's corrosive, vitriolic, toxic element that divided us even further will at least enable us to seek some common ground.
Do you have any analysis of why the margins weren't bigger, both in the presidential election, but especially the Senate election in a lot of states around the country? I know it's early to make those conclusions.
It's pretty early.
Probably a little early.
Yeah. Come back to us in 24 hours. We'll have the PhD thesis written.
A little early. Senator Blumenthal mentioned that he's going to be a candidate in 2022. I believe you're going to
No, I don't have any plans to announce. That's a long way away.
I'll do my announcement, you know, in a few weeks, a few months.
I didn't want to
Leave me out.
feel left
Leave me out. Yeah, no. Give me a little time.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Can you just paint a picture of what it would look like in the Senate if Donald Trump is reelected? Does it look like the last 4 years? Does it look different?
I'm again, we're not here to declare victory, but it looks like, while we've been standing here, Wisconsin has likely been decided for the president. Michigan, I don't think there's any path in Michigan. And once Wisconsin and Michigan are decided, that's the ball game. I think we'll win Pennsylvania, perhaps with a big margin, but it actually doesn't matter. Once the vice president has won Michigan and Wisconsin, that gets him to the magic numbers. So I don't know. Your question is fair, but I think at this point we are not in a position of having to wonder what another 4 years of Donald Trump will look like. And let me just say, it is. I get it that a lot of Democrats were hoping that Joe Biden was going to win 538 electoral votes last night, but it is not often in this country that a incumbent president loses a bid for re-election. And what we've seen is during a crisis, approval ratings shooting up for chief executives all across the country and all across the world. So crises tend to make it even harder to beat incumbents. So if Joe Biden proves victorious, it is a significant achievement given the historical and political odds that generally stand against challengers to incumbent presidents and incumbent chief executives. So if this goes the way it goes, no matter what the margin is, it's still a pretty significant development in American history and a significant achievement for the vice president.
Yeah, I'll put it a different way. If Donald Trump had led this nation, if he had faced facts and led our nation, he would have been unbeatable. Because in the midst of crisis, look at World War II, Winston Churchill. Donald Trump likes to compare himself to Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill led the British people by talking straight and fair to them, treating them as adults, not dismissing it as a hoax or saying that the Germans would be defeated by a miracle. He faced facts. And that's what Joe Biden will do. That's what a leader does. An incumbent is always hard to beat, but an incumbent in the midst of a national crisis should be unbeatable if she or he leads. And by comparison, look at Ned Lamont. Ned Lamont has led with responsibility and courage, and the people of Connecticut appreciate it. Donald Trump could have done the same thing for the nation. And again, if you go back a year with a good economy and an incumbent president with all the levers of power, which Donald Trump has never been reluctant to use, beating an incumbent, very, very uphill.
I just got this in my email inbox from the Trump campaign. Trump campaign statement on Wisconsin. Despite ridiculous public polling used as a voter suppression tactic, Wisconsin has been a razor-thin race, as we always knew that it would be. There have been reports of irregularities in several Wisconsin counties, which raises serious doubts about the validity of the results. The president is well within the threshold to request a recount, and we will immediately do so. Bill Stempien, Trump 2020 campaign manager. Any reaction?
A recount is not going to change the numbers as long as all the votes are counted, period.
Yeah, my understanding is that Biden's margin is going to be bigger than Trump's from 4 years ago, and there was no recount 4 years ago. In fact, I think we'll all check this, but I'm not sure there's an automatic recount available to a candidate who's lost by the margin that it appears the president has lost Wisconsin. But again, it is legitimate for anyone to contest elections when there have been proven irregularities. I didn't see any reports of irregularities in Wisconsin, and the margin is pretty significant. You're not talking about a handful of hanging chads in Wisconsin. You're talking about tens of thousands of votes that the president is losing by. So listen, I think that you're going to hear this over the course of today and tomorrow. The president, just like he ordered on the first day of his presidency for his press secretary to go out and contest the size of his inauguration crowd, he's going to tell his people to go out there and make wild claims about what happened yesterday. It may be that President Trump never concedes. That is very possible, but a concession speech is not necessary for a transition of power in this country. What is necessary is for the votes to be counted, and when the votes are counted, it appears very clear today what the result is going to be, no matter what Donald Trump says or does.
And just to be clear, Paul, all this talk of going to the Supreme Court, Bush v. Gore was entirely and completely different. Remember, Bush v. Gore hung on 500 votes, and it was a recount that the challengers wanted to be counted again. So what you have here is totally different, where the president is saying whole categories of votes are somehow fraudulent. There is no factual basis. I called it fact-free. There's no evidence, no facts, no basis in reality for contesting these votes in court. And the only reason to do it would be to create confusion. Trump may not concede, but the Electoral College will vote. And right now it looks like that vote's going to be for Joe Biden, not just by a little bit, but pretty substantially. And he will have a bigger margin in those states, as I said at the outset, Wisconsin and Michigan, than Trump had. And there was no recount.
All right.
Thank you.
Everybody. Thanks, everybody. Great. All right, so we're going to go try to catch that route.
The rally.
Okay. See you there. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, I think so.
10 a.m.
I'm so tired.
I just did my little launch here, so
Thank you.
for the new website. It'll
Oh,
be
there's
nice.
a new website. Okay.
Yep, the Waterbury Economic Initiative website tomorrow launches.
Oh, is that what this is
So
about?
tomorrow we'll have a press conference at 10 a.m. Go over everything. We'll have a couple speakers, so it'll be good.
And what is the purpose, the goal?
The goal is to get more business to Waterbury.
Okay, who's going to be there tomorrow?
Mayor, Dr. Gruffin, John Hoskins, Frank Montero. So it's the works group that's launching it for us. Yep. I just wanted to double check with everyone, send it out again. I know the works group has sent it out too, so
That's on my radar.
yeah, perfect.
Like 2 minutes, guys.
It's a great story. So.
No, I hear you.
All right. Thank you.
Really? Wow, that's
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming out. I'm very excited to learn that I have secured my first re-election. I spoke to Mr. Sullivan this morning, and he congratulated me. This has been just an incredibly, just a crazy first term in Congress. This, even campaigning in the middle of a pandemic, I could have never imagined it. But people really stood up and they voted, they participated, and I just am so incredibly thankful for that. I'm so grateful for my staff, for all of my volunteers, for all of my supporters who got involved. I am personally so grateful to the voters, for the city of Waterbury, where people just turned up and voted, were enthusiastic about voting. I saw people across the district just really taking, our democracy seriously and engaging and participating. Last night we were getting the numbers and I felt comfortable that we were in a good place, but my campaign spent a lot of time over the last 2 months encouraging people to vote early, to mail in their absentee ballots, and all of those votes are important, and I wanted to wait for all of those votes to be counted. My son actually mailed in his ballot. I want his ballot to be counted. So I was being patient and just waiting. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to do, but I would not have even come out now but for the fact that Mr. Sullivan called and conceded. So I just thank everybody. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot to put our community back together. We have a lot to just repair the damage that's been caused by COVID. And I really want to continue to be a strong representative for this district. I spent a lot of time listening to people, learning about this district, and I know that my second term will be even stronger than the first one because I'm committed to being everybody's congressperson, to bringing all voices into the conversation. I did tell Mr. Sullivan, I know that law and order was something that was central to his campaign and seemed to be a community that he was speaking to. I have always been committed to supporting our law enforcement. I remain committed. I would hope that we extend that same level of commitment and support to the spouses and families of law enforcement officers. And he agreed with me. But again, so many, the Waterbury Fire Department, actually the fire departments, first responders all over my district, teachers, local unions, local activists, so many people from so many different backgrounds, experiences, walks of life, neighborhood, came up and supported me. We're aligned in so many ways, and I'm going to work really hard to expand that number and bring more people in. And, I just hope that other people will do the same. We have a tremendous opportunity here, to look at everything that's happened and pull out the things that worked and make them better, and then work on the things that didn't work. And I'm committed to doing that. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll take some questions.
I apologize if I missed this. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
I apologize if I missed. You said this earlier. Did you extend any kind of an appeal for restraint and respect to fellow leaders as country waits for the results to come in from the swing states?
Well, in my own campaign, I issued a statement last night, that I would not make a statement about the results until all of the votes were counted. We have to respect the process. We worked so hard. This is the first time. I wasn't sure what to expect here in Connecticut with this many absentee ballots out. So I was not going to preemptively make a statement or presume anything. So I mean, as a leader, I try to lead by example. I can't tell other people how to run their races or what to do, but I would hope that all leaders would do the same thing.
How different was this race for you than 2016?
When am I just going to get a normal campaign? I mean, I'm like, 2016 was just like nothing we had ever seen. We had no infrastructure. We really had to start from scratch. And I think the nice thing is that we found a base of people who were so invested in that race, and we were able to call on a lot of those same people and bring more people in. This time we didn't canvass at all. The pandemic really hit us hard. I had COVID in September, so I wasn't out at all. I really had to rely on my supporters in a way that I don't even think I was comfortable with. And people just stepped up, but there was nothing we can do. And then there were so many other people who were campaigning at the same time and doing things differently. So I had to balance, well, they're out and they're doing this. What does that mean? So I really had to make some hard decisions and just say, this is the way I choose to run this campaign, and we have to try to get the message out. And Mr. Sullivan was a much stronger candidate. He was a much stronger candidate. And I was, I wasn't responsive, but I knew that I had a responsibility to make sure that my message was penetrating and that people understood the work that I had done and where I stood on the issues. And this time I had a record, a voting record to defend, to try to amplify. In 2018, I spoke in aspirational terms about what I would like to do. In 2020, I had to tell people this is what I've done and this is the work I would like to continue. And it was very important to me that the margin didn't decrease. We had to stay steady or expand. So it was very different this year.
That was my follow-up, that at the end of the day you won, but it wasn't a slam dunk. And David Sullivan did wage a pretty strong campaign. So what does that say to you as far as what voters feel is important? And is that something to pay attention to?
Well, I've always been paying attention to voters, and I think the numbers rounded out about the same as Manny Santos's numbers. So I think you're giving more credit than is due. So, but I think that it was just having a consistent message and talking to voters. But I've never taken it for granted. Even last night, we've always worked hard right up till the last minute. I campaigned just as hard this year as I did in 2018. I never took it for granted. So, but in everything, I am reflective, and I heard what people were saying, and in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, these are the areas where I have to make sure that people know where I stand, or this is where I have to solidify a foundation. But I've never taken this for granted.
Related question to that. So, I think everyone would agree that President Trump did sort of better than everyone expected him to do, including in some towns in your district. Would you care to, can you comment on that and what you think is the enduring appeal of President Trump and his policies to people in your district?
I think it reinforced the idea that we have a divided nation, and we're going to have to do a lot of work to put things back together. I have to tell you that I am surprised by people literally are choosing a side. So to try to find some common ground in the middle is going to be a very difficult task. I think I'm up for that. One of the things that is concerning is that just even and I know this isn't new to politics, but some of the things that were happening in these campaigns, and I don't want it to be okay for people to practice bad behavior. Some of the things that we saw, I think we should all be able to agree, this is not how it should happen. Even now, declaring victory before the votes are counted, trying to stop the votes from being counted. I think whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat, anyone who believes in this democracy should say, we want all votes to be counted, and I don't want that to be one of those enduring things that comes out of this race, so out of this election. So, but I recognize that there are some people who either I am not appealing to or don't feel represented by me or feel like there's no way I could understand their issues, and I'm going to work really hard to make sure that even if they disagree with me, they know that I too represent them.
Congresswoman, was there a point last night when you thought to yourself, oh, this is not going to happen?
For me?
Yeah. Yeah, for you.
No, because no. I mean, in 2018, we saw the primary, the votes came really quickly. This year, I wasn't expected. I already prepared myself that we won't have the numbers tonight, so they were coming in slow. But there was a point where I hadn't thought much about, I hadn't allowed myself to think about winning. It was like, we're going to put a strong case out there, but I don't want to jinx it. But there was a point last night where I realized I haven't even considered losing. Like, what does that look like? Or, do I need to start thinking about that? But it was a fleeting thought. It just really...
At what point was that fleeting thought?
I think it was just when we saw that locations hadn't reported. In 2018, we were getting numbers in real time right from the precincts, and then the smaller towns were reporting first, and many of those towns were coming in as heavy Republican votes. So without the balance, you know, we hadn't gotten the Farmington Valley, we haven't gotten some of the suburban areas. We had, you know, some of the smaller towns in Litchfield County, but it really, there was a time where it was going, it seemed really, really close, and it wasn't breaking away. But I mean, I know how it works, and my campaign manager kept saying, just so you know, this is not all the numbers. I was like, no, I'm good. But no, I was never, I mean, I am, you guys have heard me, I am so deeply grounded in my faith. I believe in the process. If the people decided that I wasn't the one to represent them, then I would have been completely supportive. I mean, you do the best you can. And sometimes it's good enough and sometimes it's not. But I really thought we've done everything. All day yesterday I was like, is there anything else I can do? And at that point it was up to people to vote. So I could always say I was a congresswoman. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So how does it feel winning your first re-election?
Oh my God. Well, there are some people who are like, you have to start thinking about 2022 or tomorrow. I'm like, no, let's just suck in what just happened, you know. I got this seat, and then I defended this seat. I have an amazing, I don't know, my campaign manager and my finance director who have been with me since the first campaign, who literally, you know, we got all this advice, you have to do this, you have to do this, and they really trusted my vision of the way I wanted this campaign to be run, the way I wanted to engage people, and it worked. The fact that so many people were mobilized and energized and remained, so now I'm going to work on keeping those people engaged. You can't just vote for people and then go home and say my work here is done. You know, it only works if you continue to participate, if people continue to stay active, if people continue to hold leaders accountable. So if I wasn't doing the job that people sent me to do, then they shouldn't vote for me again. So this really is just playing out my 15 years in the classroom. You know, really connecting all the dots that if you engage, if you're activated, if you mobilize, if you participate, you can send the leaders that you want, and then you have an option, you have a choice to evaluate them and decide whether or not to send them back. So I could not be more proud of what we did, what we continue to do. I made a conscious choice to run a clean campaign, and I know that works, and I hope people will respond to that. And literally, as more people decide I want to run for office or I'm not sure how to do this, that they can pull something from my campaign and use that as an example. So it feels good. It feels good.
Can I ask you, when you go back to Washington, what is the first thing that you want to work on with your colleagues?
That's just it. What's the first thing I want to work on? Even 2 years ago, I had all these plans, and you have to legislate in the time that you're in. So obviously, I would want to work on my committees on issues surrounding special education and food security, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. So we have to get relief out to people. We have to make sure we stabilize our economy. We have to get this virus under control and get our businesses back online, get people back to work. So even though I have all these things that I would love to do, what the people in this district need me to do right now is to deliver relief to them. So we have to get a COVID package out the door. And then I'm hoping that in the long term, we will look at all of the things that COVID has exposed, the gaps in education, the gaps in food security, the gaps in housing, and say, how do we address these systemic issues in a real way? And I don't think anyone can ignore the social unrest that we've seen in our country over the last couple months. We have a mandate to do something about that, to have some honest conversations, to talk about what we need to do better. But to say this doesn't exist and it doesn't exist here is very naive. So we really have to, and I've seen that in this district where people are having meetings and, you know, in their communities really having some difficult conversations. I want to be a part of that too, because we can be better than this, and there's a lot of work to do, and I believe that now is the time to begin to do that healing. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I appreciate you. This is my victory party.
We love you, Jahana.